Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss not just the way Labour are laying the groundwork for more taxes on the wealthy, but how complaints from the Tories are just crocodile tears. Not only did the Tories spend their entire 14 years in government raising taxes themselves, but they did so whilst also crushing the size of our economy long before COVID and the war in Ukraine, and so stifled the natural growth of tax revenues. I mean, let's look at a few facts and figures, shall we? For the last financial year that Labour were in government, the total tax receipts were £415 billion. This worked out about 22% of our GDP. The latest tax year had tax receipt figures of £828 billion. Now, GDP figures are a little behind, but that sort of works out in terms of the latest figures, 36% of GDP with the latest we have. I will point out, because those GDP figures lag a little behind, it will change a little, but the point is that our tax receipts are way higher as a share of GDP than they were under Labour. And this is caused by a combination of a couple of things. First of all, taxes are just higher in real terms. Like, let's take inflation into account, which we should do for real terms comparisons. So we use a 2024 value of the pound. Those tax revenues in 2010 would have worked out at £622 billion compared to the £828 billion the Tories actually took in. That is an increase in tax receipts of 33% in real terms. So the facts are clear. The Tories are the party of taxation. They're charging 33% more taxes in real terms than Labour did. And the tax burden is set to go up for several years yet. And that was according to the budget the Tories had been setting. They offered a few headline tax cuts, which were already unaffordable. But as people kept pointing out, the overall tax burden was still rising. You were giving people a quid back, but taking a tenner out their back pocket. And it's still going to rise. And it's going to rise under Labour. It has to rise. It doesn't matter who was in government. Second thing, the increased taxes are also partly down to the fact that the Tories crushed our economy. In real terms, again, if UK GDP had remained exactly the same as when Labour last left government, which would be appalling, 14 years of no net growth of the economy, that would be really bad. But if it had been exactly the same, our GDP should be £2.78 trillion. It's actually 2.27 trillion. That is a drop of 18%. The Tories spent 14 years making our economy 18% smaller in real terms. They're trying to claim they've left us in a good economic position. They've left Labour in a good economic position, a position of economic recovery. If the media to actually report the true state of affairs, the Tories would have their reputation for economic competence wiped out forever. I mean, they've lost it right now, but that stench of incompetence is attached to the individuals who formed the most recent government, where people actually noticed it. I doubt many realise just how much damage they did going right back to Cameron. Speaking of which, on this complaining about tax rises, Labour are going to put taxes straight up. David Cameron hadn't even been Prime Minister for more than a few weeks. He won the election 1 month. The very next month, his Chancellor, George Osborne, announced a budget that increased VAT. Their first act was to raise taxes. Labour have pledged that they will not increase income tax, VAT or national insurance, and that they won't increase the tax burden for people on low to middle incomes. So whereas the Tories loaded up the tax burden on those on tighter incomes disproportionately, Labour are going to do it higher up the pyramid. And that's what the Tories hate. That's what they're not looking forward to. Parliament goes into summer recess a bit later than usual next week. Rachel Reeves is going to make a statement about the state of the country's finances to MPs. She is expected to savagely attack the economic legacy she's been left with, the ruinous state of public services, and lay the groundwork for tax rises on the rich without hurting ordinary workers in her budget this autumn. Starmer and Reeves have both been saying the crises left by the Tories are worse than they thought now that they've seen the details. I said they would use this line before the election. The Tories and their client journalists cry foul. Oh, yeah, exactly how bad it was. But they've only got themselves to blame. The facts speak for themselves. Our economy is smaller than it was when they took over. I wish Labour would bang that drum a bit more. The media keep getting excited. Oh, whenever we get a month or a quarter of growth, oh, look, a recovery. And then it's tumbleweeds whilst it's shrinking again. And they never bring in real terms growth or, heaven forbid, GDP per capita, because that was way worse. The reason they don't ever talk about that under the Tories is because they're covering for their piracy. And the reason they don't ever talk about it under Labour is because it's going up. Except, of course, like if you have something like the banking crash, in which case, obviously, it's all over the news. Which is why Labour always have to make sure that people feel the benefits of economic improvements. It's not enough to have it show up in the data. They can't go, look, growth. Nobody will ever show that to the public under a Labour government. It's also why, although I get the anxiety some people have, well, Labour seem to be a bit careful in their approach to what they're going to do. We know, just as they know, their electoral success depends on people feeling it. Despite what the media tells them, they have to feel that their lives are getting better, because the media will tell them their lives are getting worse. So it has to be real and it has to be noticeable. They will not get to win the next election by saying, look, everything's going really well. It's all in place, but you have to vote for us again to see it. The Tories have spent a decade saying that. It ran out of steam. Labour will never get away with it. And that's why they have to move quickly. Improvements don't happen overnight. And the clock is ticking. And come the next election, let us say things are on an upward trajectory and you can look at all sorts of data and everything's going well, but people don't really feel it. The media will say to people, we told you they wouldn't improve things, and they haven't improved things. And then people go, yeah, they didn't improve things. Ruinous. So Labour have to make sure people feel it. They have to have people. When the media tell them, oh, they haven't actually made anything better, they need people to go, well, it's better for me. That is why they've moved quickly on low carbon energy, on housing. It's why they will move quickly on fixing public services. Now, in the long term, growth will naturally grow tax revenues. Keir Starmer and Reeves have talked a lot about, we're going to solve these problems with growth. And they've put the emphasis on growth, economic growth. It's like, great, but how do you get that growth? Investment. And how to get that investment? Okay, a more stable government and better engagement with those who might invest. But the state has to invest in itself. And as high as the tax burden is, because the economy has shrunk so much, it needs to be higher still. Economists all agree on this. And so we'll be getting those additional tax rises announced this autumn. Everyone knows it. Everyone's talking openly about it, apart from Labour, of course. But they are laying the groundwork. Because what are Labour doing? They're talking about the fact there's this massive hole in public finances, that there's all these crises. Oh, you didn't even say about this. You didn't even mention this. And those additional tax rises, they're not going to be dumped on people already struggling with the cost of living. It's not just that it's unfair. Like, Labour aren't going to win elections doing that. It will fall on those with the broadest shoulders. And do you know what I'm looking forward to? You know, all those Tory client journalists and other associated oddballs who loudly praised Liz Truss for Kwarteng's budget statement 2 years previous. Oh, the first Conservative budget in ages. Oh, Nigel Farage loved it as well. They all did. They all said it was marvellous. They all said it was fantastic. Those same people will savage Reeves's budget this autumn as the death knell for civilization itself. It will be hilarious. What it will also be is just as wrong as their articles on the Truss Kwarteng budget. Because there is one accusation the Tories are levelling at Labour that I do think is absolutely true. Sunak is complaining that Labour had always planned to do this. Oh, we told you they'd already planned to do this. Yeah, you're right, they did. Labour said two things during the election campaign that made it obvious. They said that they wouldn't have to raise additional taxes like capital gains tax to pay for their manifesto promises. Oh, manifesto promises fully funded, which it is. People have acknowledged it's fully funded. But they also said that the manifesto was the minimum they wanted to do, that they actually want to do more. And the Tories have left Labour with various problems that the Labour manifesto didn't really touch on. You know, council struggling, some going to the wall. Public sector pay in need of attention. Public buildings in disrepair. We've had schools, hospitals, other buildings fall down. None of these things were explicitly covered in Labour's manifesto spending plans, but they all need addressing, and addressing urgently. So yeah, Labour did always plan to do this, but the reason they have to is entirely down to the way the Tories abused the economy for 14 years. In real terms, our taxes are 36% higher than they were under Labour, and our economy is 18% smaller. Labour should really make that point loudly and repeatedly, and call out the crocodile tears of the Tories, who are only actually upset that it will be ordinary working people sheltered for a change in the upcoming budget, because they are the ones who spent 14 years raising taxes on ordinary people. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.